Hi, this is Walter Weesey with my Montana Guide Flies fly tying video for April 4th, 2025. And what I'm doing today is a pattern I call a Special K Caddis, Caddis Pupa pattern obviously. And this is Mother's Day Caddis color. And you might be thinking, why is he tying a Mother's Day Caddis pattern this early? You know, it's a month before Mother's Day. And the answer is the Gardner River. The Gardner River in Yellowstone Park, the lower end of it, is now open year-round, and it's geothermally heated, and so the caddis are going to hatch earlier there than anywhere else. And we're due for some 60-something degree temperatures here in Livingston next week, and after snowing all week this week, it's very odd. But anyhow, there's a chance, I think, that there's going to be Mother's Day caddis next week on the Gardner River, and if not next week, probably the week after. And so I figured I'd do a caddis pupa pattern. Now I want to talk about the name a little bit. Like I said, Special K Caddis, and I'm actually going to talk about guitars for a second. And the reason for that is, if you buy a Gibson guitar, the snazzier version is called the standard, and then beyond that's the custom. But so the standard version is called the standard, and then kind of the more stripped down model a lot of the time is actually called a special. And this is kind of the same thing. This is kind of the stripped down model of Juan Ramirez's Kryptonite Caddis. And you can see here the body on this fly is actually Ultra Chenille. It's tapered like you'd taper the end of a San Juan worm with a lighter. And is this as effective, you know, as snazzy as Juan Ramirez's Kryptonite Caddis? Usually not quite. But is it effective enough? Maybe, maybe not. I find it's basically just as effective on the Yellowstone River. It might not be as effective on your home water, but it's much easier to tie. And so kind of take that with a grain of salt. You know, tie some of these, try them, and if they work for you, use them. If not, sweat over tying the bodies on those Kryptonite Caddis. There's a million videos of that pattern out there as well, including those tied by Juan himself. Anyway, now I'm going to shut up and tie. Okay, so my hook in the vise is a size 16 scud hook, and then I've got a 3/32 inch black nickel brass bead on here. And on my Caddis pupae, I do generally prefer brass beads because I'm often fishing these under relatively small dry flies, and obviously a tungsten bead will sink it. I tie some weightless as well. My thread's going to be 8/0 olive done, and I'm just going to start that at the front and then wrap back, you know, bead length and a half. Then my underbody on this fly, which you can omit if you like, is just going to be black holographic flashaboo or black tinsel. You know, they're the same thing basically. And what I like to do is grab that down in the middle and then just double it around the thread, so that in effect I'm using 2 strands now of the flashaboo. I'm going to wrap that back, and don't worry about going super far down the bend or anything, because this is really just for a little bit of additional flash. And then I'm going to apply super glue to that underbody, because that's how I like to reinforce my tinsel or flashaboo bodies. And if you watch my videos, you know I like to wrap all kinds of things over super glue. And I do generally prefer using 2 thin strands of the flash material rather than a thicker black tinsel, because you know, if you miss a turn a little bit, you've got the second strand to kind of fill in that gap. And so I find it creates not necessarily a smoother body, but a more consistent one. All right, so then the next step is to tie in that body. And if you want to tie a regular Kryptonite Caddis, watch Juan Ramirez do it. And what he does is it's actually a knot made out of fishing line, and that he then coats with UV resin. And so it's a bit of a process. What I'm going to do here, I've got a strand of insect green standard Ultra Chenille, and you do want to use the standard size. The midge is too thin. And I tried all kinds of things. Squirmy wormy material, diamond braid, and this one I think looks the best. But I'm going to taper that just like you would a San Juan worm. So I've got a lighter here, and I'm just going to kind of flick that over, and don't overdo it. You see how I barely, you know, change the diameter of that. And then I like that to extend kind of maybe a bead length behind the end of that underbody, so just slightly behind the bend. So I'll tie that in and then cut my excess. And my hackle is actually going to be CDC here. And I've already tied one with this, but you can see this is a brown-gray CDC feather. And you can use natural gray, natural dun, whatever. And obviously change all the colors here if you're tying, for the summer caddis, the hydropsyche, I'd be using probably a gold or brown flash and then an amber or khaki on the body, and then probably just natural dun, a little paler on the on the hackle. But anyway, I've got a binder clip here, and you can use all kinds of things for this. And if you have a good CDC feather, so I don't have one out here, but if you had a good CDC feather, actually here's one. You can see how here this is a thinner stem and it's kind of denser fibers, shorter fibers. That one I would just tie in by the tip and wrap like a soft hackle. But to use a bigger feather like this, kind of a lower quality feather, you see how thick that stem is. I'm going to grab that with my binder clip and then just cut that CDC off the stem. And you can get all kinds of fancy tools to do this job, but the binder clip works just as well. And then I'm going to make a dubbing loop here. And if you use a split thread technique, that also works. I just don't use the split thread technique because the threads I usually use aren't suited for it. But it amounts to the same thing. So I just got a loop of thread there. And I'm going to hook that in my shepherd's crook. And that's my preferred dubbing loop tool. You can see that here with the hook on it. There's other things that do the same job. And I grab my binder clip, and you see how I kind of got the fibers sort of all at one end of that. I'm going to slip that end. I'm going to slip those fibers in, and then pull my thread tight, and then release it. Now this is going to be too thin. You can see here, hopefully, that this is kind of all spread out. And what I'm actually going to do here is just come in and slide those up towards the hook with my fingers, and then I'll spread them back out again a little bit. And so that kind of doubles or even triples your fiber density to get kind of what you would have if you were wrapping that feather. And that way I don't need as many turns of thread. So I'm going to drop my bobbin cradle here and then hang my working thread over the top of that. And then I'm going to grab that CDC, right underneath the CDC there. You see I'm holding that that thread. And then I'm going to spin up that dubbing twister without letting go. And I let it go all at once, and so it spins up into that nice kind of bottle brush looking thing. And then I'm going to use my rotary function and make 2 or 3 turns. And I'm not worried at all about, binding some down here because I'm going to tie a head in here anyway, and that'll clean that up. Alright, so just a couple turns, and then trim off the excess of the dubbing loop, get the bobbin cradle out of the way, and then I'm going to clean up. And then my head on this fly, which is very minimal, is going to be black squirrel, and you can use whatever nymph dubbing you like. If I had black Arizona synthetic peacock, that's actually what I'd use, but I appear to be out. And less is very much more with the head on this fly. You see here I've got less than an inch of dubbing on there, and even that might be too much. So I'll make 3 or 4 turns there, and then get my whip finisher. 1, 2, 3, and then another one. All right, and there you have it, Special K Caddis. And I usually don't bother, honestly, putting head cement on flies like this where I've got the dubbing all the way up to the bead. You could if you want. You could also break some of these longer fibers if you wanted. I usually find that that's not necessary. That kind of just extra length just creates extra movement. But there you have it. That's a kind of a simplified Kryptonite caddis. I find it's almost as effective on the Yellowstone and faster, and I think it's also more durable because the commercially tied Kryptonite caddis, at least, the body kind of tends to pull out. And I think that's because the tires overseas are not using super glue to tie in the monofilament that's used for the body. But anyhow, very simple kind of clone of a Kryptonite caddis. I find it's pretty effective on the Yellowstone and the Madison. And timing is coming up when we're going to be using these. Hopefully we get a good hatch on the Yellowstone this year. A lot of the time the Yellowstone doesn't get good hatches. The Madison always does. And I'm looking forward to trying it on the Gardner because this is the first year that the Gardner's ever been open this time of year. As always, thanks for watching, and if you find this pattern helpful, if you find my other content helpful, click the Buy Me a Coffee link in the bottom. If you are looking for a guided trip in the Yellowstone region, give me a call. I'm at flyfishmontana.biz. See you next time.